The Sith are often known to recruit Force wielders into the dark side, either by training them from a young age or through careful manipulation, as seen with Count Dooku, Anakin Skywalker, and others like them. However, even among those who were manipulated by a Sith Lord, there appears to be a recurring pattern in the descent into the dark side. The Sith rarely create corruption from nothing. Instead, they exploit existing fractures within a Force wielder's beliefs, emotions, or sense of purpose. For some, the fall begins with disillusionment with the Jedi Order, a growing belief that the Order has lost its way, become dogmatic, or failed in its duty to the galaxy. Others begin to believe that they know better than the Jedi Council, that their personal insight or moral clarity surpasses centuries of collective wisdom. In these cases, pride and certainty quietly replace humility and restraint. For others still, the descent is driven by a genuine desire to fix the galaxy, to impose peace, justice, or order through control rather than balance. What begins as noble intent slowly transforms into authoritarian thinking, the belief that freedom is a flaw and that only decisive power can bring lasting stability. And then there are those whose fall is fueled by emotional extremes: fear, grief, anger, or attachment. These emotions often disguise themselves as righteousness or moral urgency. The Jedi Code warns against such extremes not because emotion itself is evil, but because unchecked emotion can narrow judgment, making the dark side feel like a necessary tool rather than a dangerous temptation. What makes this pattern especially unsettling is that it does not belong exclusively to Sith Lords or fallen apprentices. Several respected Jedi Masters figures of great wisdom, power, and influence have exhibited these same warning signs. Some walked dangerously close to the edge. Others momentarily stepped over it, only to return, and a few might have fallen completely had circumstances or a single choice been different. These Jedi were not weak, they were not ignorant. In many cases, they were among the Order's finest, and that is precisely the point. The dark side does not prey on the powerless, it preys on conviction, certainty, and the belief that one's cause is just enough to justify any means. We will be looking at Jedi Masters who nearly followed this path, those whose disillusionment, pride, desire for control, or emotional turmoil placed them within striking distance of the Sith, and ask the question, how close were they, really, to becoming everything they once swore to destroy? Not all Jedi who walked close to the dark side did so out of fear or ambition. Some did so in the name of justice. Mace Windu was one of the most disciplined and formidable Jedi Masters of his era, yet his strength came with a dangerous proximity to the very darkness the Jedi sought to suppress. Through his mastery of Vapad, a variation of the lightsaber combat style known as Form 7, otherwise called Juyo, Windu learned to channel and reflect dark side energies without succumbing to them. But this balance was never guaranteed. It was constantly contested. Due to its intense reliance on a practitioner's internal emotions to gain dominance in combat, Form 7 gradually shifted from being merely frowned upon to being feared and heavily restricted. Many within the Jedi Order worried that its principles, rooted in passion, aggression, and emotional intensity, could draw its users dangerously close to the dark side. As a result, knowledge of Form 7 became increasingly limited among the Jedi. The Sith, by contrast, embraced these risks without hesitation. Dark side Force wielders such as Darth Maul wielded Juyo freely, as did Dark Jedi like Galen Marek, for whom emotional extremity was not a liability but a weapon. In the final years of the Galactic Republic, a new interpretation of Form 7 emerged. This variant, known as Vapad, was developed by Jedi Masters Mace Windu and Sora Bulk, and was named after a predatory creature native to the planet Serapin. Unlike traditional lightsaber forms, Vapad was described not merely as a fighting technique, but as a state of mind. Vapad allowed its practitioner to draw upon their inner darkness without surrendering to it, channeling their own aggression while simultaneously feeding off an opponent's fury. This razor-thin balance made Vapad extraordinarily powerful, but also profoundly dangerous, placing its wielder perpetually on the edge between mastery and corruption. Combined with Windu's rigid view of the Jedi Code, his distrust of political authority, and his readiness to execute Palpatine without trial, it revealed a master whose righteousness nearly crossed into absolutism. Had he taken one more step, had his certainty replaced restraint, Mace Windu may have justified the dark side as a necessary instrument of justice. Unlike many Jedi who brush against the dark side through pride, ambition, or a desire for control, Obi-Wan Kenobi's greatest vulnerability was loss. From an early age, Obi-Wan experienced repeated emotional trauma, often in rapid succession. His master, Qui-Gon Jinn, was killed before his eyes. The woman he loved, Satine Kryze, was murdered by Darth Maul while Obi-Wan was forced to watch. His closest friend and brother, Anakin Skywalker, fell to the dark side and became Darth Vader. Each of these moments carried the same temptation that has broken countless Jedi before him, grief turning into rage. And yet, Obi-Wan never took that final step. There were moments when he came dangerously close. His duels with Maul, especially their encounters on Tatooine and Mandalore, revealed flashes of restrained fury. Against Anakin on Mustafar, Obi-Wan fought not only to stop a Sith Lord, but to survive the betrayal of everything he loved. Any one of these confrontations could have become a turning point, but Obi-Wan's defining trait was not emotional detachment, it was acceptance. Where others sought to dominate pain, Obi-Wan endured it. He allowed grief to exist without letting it define his actions. This is where Obi-Wan diverges sharply from Sith ideology. The Sith believed suffering must be harnessed, sharpened, and weaponized. Obi-Wan believed suffering must be acknowledged and released. Even when tempted by righteous justification, killing Maul, executing Vader, or abandoning the Jedi Code entirely, Obi-Wan chose restraint. He fought only when necessary, and even then, he sought resolution rather than annihilation. His refusal to strike down a defeated enemy was not weakness, it was discipline. Unlike Anakin, Obi-Wan never believed he knew better than the Force. Unlike Dooku, he never turned disillusionment into superiority. And unlike Windu, he never allowed righteousness to harden into absolutism. If Obi-Wan had embraced anger even once, if he had allowed revenge for Qui-Gon or Satine to guide his hand, his fall would have been swift and devastating. The Sith thrive on exactly the kind of emotional weight Obi-Wan carried for decades. And yet, Obi-Wan Kenobi remained a Jedi. Not because he was untouched by darkness, but because he stood beside it, acknowledged it, and chose not to let it rule him. Some Jedi come close to the dark side not through anger or hatred, but through defiance. Qui-Gon Jinn consistently challenged the Jedi Council not out of pride or ambition, but out of an unwavering belief in the living Force. He trusted the will of the Force more than rigid doctrine, and in doing so, he walked a path that brought him dangerously close to isolation. While Qui-Gon never embraced the dark side, his willingness to disregard authority and follow his own interpretations reflects a trait the Sith have long learned to exploit. Between 40 BBY and 37 BBY, Qui-Gon began to experience deep inner turmoil regarding how the Jedi Order truly understood and interacted with the Force. Though Yoda sensed this conflict within him, Jinn continued to carry out his Jedi duties, even as doubt quietly took root. During this period, Qui-Gon and his Padawan, Obi-Wan Kenobi, were dispatched to the planet Breen to oversee negotiations between the Priestess Tower of Wood and the Industrial Metal Clan. While Kenobi remained aboard their Edda-class shuttle, Jinn proceeded alone to meet with the Priestess's rivals. The negotiations rapidly turned hostile when the Metal Clan attempted to assassinate both Jinn and Thair, using the chaos as justification to begin the systematic destruction of Breen's forests. Qui-Gon immediately moved to defend the Priestess, deflecting blaster fire with his lightsaber as the attack intensified. He contacted Kenobi, ordering him to power up the shuttle and informing him that negotiations had failed. When the Metal Clan surrounded them, they proclaimed that Jinn was a warrior capable of destroying all who opposed her. Qui-Gon rejected this portrayal. Instead of striking back, he used a Force-assisted leap to escape with the Priestess, ordering Kenobi to set a course for Coruscant to ensure her protection. Yet Coruscant offered Thair no solace. She dismissed the world as nothing more than a city of metal and urged Qui-Gon to embrace the role she believed Jedi were meant to fulfill, that of warriors. She demanded he slaughter every member of the Metal Clan in vengeance. Qui-Gon refused, insisting such actions were not the Jedi way. In response, Diach branded him a coward, accusing him of falling short of the legendary image of the Jedi as great soldiers. The accusation cut deeply. Not because Qui-Gon doubted his courage, but because it challenged the very identity he believed the Jedi should embody, guardians of the Force, not instruments of destruction. Upon returning to the Jedi Temple, Qui-Gon chose not to report the events on Breen to the High Council. Instead, he withdrew inward, burdened by the encounter and the questions it raised. Yoda soon sought him out, finding Jinn alone on a temple balcony. Under the pretense of requesting a formal report, one Qui-Gon knew Kenobi had already submitted, Yoda initiated a rare and candid discussion. The two masters spoke openly about the role of the Jedi, the nature of balance, and the growing distance between the Order and the living Force itself. Though they did not fully agree, they reached a crucial understanding. Qui-Gon would need to seek his own answers. Believing that clarity could only be found where life flourished untamed, Qui-Gon departed Coruscant aboard his Delta-7 Jedi Interceptor, accompanied only by his astromech droid. He surrendered himself completely to the will of the Force. He emerged from hyperspace above a charted yet unnamed world. Upon setting foot on its surface, he was struck by the planet's raw natural beauty, an impression that quickly gave way to unease. Beneath its vibrant life, Qui-Gon sensed the dark side spreading slowly, like a deep corruption woven into the land itself. Unsure whether the Force had led him there to confront this darkness or to learn from it, Qui-Gon pressed onward until he discovered an ancient temple. Seated upon its throne, he questioned whether light could truly exist in such a place. It was there, in the temple's silence, that the Force confronted him with a terrifying vision. Qui-Gon found himself surrounded by red-skinned humanoid figures emerging from writhing tendrils of darkness. Dark markings already stained his own skin and Jedi robes. When one of the figures lunged at him, he ignited his lightsaber and struck back, cutting them down as they advanced. But with each blow, the crimson color faded from their bodies. They were Jedi. As realization set in, the darkness that had clung to them began creeping across Qui-Gon himself. By choosing violence, he had empowered the dark side. The shadow spread across his face, and he awoke in horror. Yet before him, light flowed into the ancient monument. In that moment, Qui-Gon understood the lesson the Force had imparted. True balance could not be achieved through conflict alone. Unchecked violence, even in the name of righteousness, would transform the Jedi into the very thing they opposed. The corruption on the planet had not been destroyed but reshaped, blooming into flowers that existed in harmony with the light. Upon returning to Coruscant, Qui-Gon met Yoda once more on a temple balcony. Before the Grand Master, he defended the pursuit of balance, arguing that while the Jedi must never yield to the dark side, they also could not afford such rigidity that they lost touch with the living Force itself. Qui-Gon Jinn would later be killed by Darth Maul on Naboo. During the funeral, as his former master Count Dooku mourned, he confronted Darth Sidious in private. Dooku accused the Sith Lord of orchestrating Jinn's death, believing Sidious had allowed Darth Maul to kill him, and declared that Qui-Gon would have been a powerful ally to their cause. And therein lies the final irony. Qui-Gon Jinn never fell to the dark side, but he stood close enough to it that the Sith recognized his value. Had his defiance turned inward, had his trust in the living Force become belief in his own infallibility, his path might have diverged dramatically. Not all who walk near the darkness fall, but some walk close enough for the Sith to take notice. When discussing Jedi who stood closest to the precipice, Yoda's name may seem unexpected. After all, Master Yoda was the very embodiment of Jedi wisdom, the living symbol of restraint, patience, and balance. Yet it is precisely this reputation that makes his story so significant. For centuries, Yoda helped shape an order that grew increasingly confident in its own permanence. The Jedi believed they understood the Force, believed the Sith were extinct, and believed balance had already been achieved. This quiet certainty dulled their perception. Yoda did not fall to the dark side, but his unwavering faith in Jedi tradition delayed the recognition of the Sith's return. In another context, such certainty could have hardened wisdom into arrogance, and patience into blindness. Near the end of the war, that certainty was finally shaken. While meditating, Yoda sensed the presence of Qui-Gon Jinn, who proved his existence by levitating him. The experience left Yoda unsettled and distracted, and while speaking with Anakin Skywalker in the Temple Gardens, he admitted he was beginning to question Jedi dogma, specifically the belief that identity could not survive union with the Force. Concerned that the strain of war had left Yoda vulnerable to Sith influence, the Council tested him, ultimately placing him in a deprivation ritual that brought him close to death. There, Qui-Gon instructed him to journey in secret, setting Yoda on a path that would test his very soul. On Dagobah, and later on the world of the Force priestesses, Yoda confronted visions of annihilation, guilt, and loss, manifestations of his own dark side, his hubris, and his failures as a teacher. He witnessed the Jedi slaughtered, saw Ahsoka Tano die by his inaction, and was tempted by visions of fallen allies restored. Each trial forced Yoda to confront attachment, regret, and the temptation to impose control over fate itself, emotions the Sith freely embrace. Only by recognizing illusion and releasing his attachments did Yoda pass these trials. His final test came on Moraband, the Sith homeworld. There, Darth Sidious attempted to break him through visions of betrayal, slaughter, and power. Yoda was forced to choose between victory and compassion, between destroying the Sith and saving Anakin Skywalker. In refusing to sacrifice another for triumph, Yoda rejected the final temptation of the dark side, the belief that ends justify means. Yoda emerged victorious, but changed. He understood that the Jedi had been wrong, not in their devotion to the light, but in their certainty. His later exile on Dagobah was not merely retreat, but penance and balance. His presence holding the planet's dark side in check. Yoda never became Sith, but his journey reveals how close even the wisest Jedi can come, not through hatred or ambition, but through certainty. And in that truth lies the most dangerous lesson of all.